Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a few more minutes and let some folks get online with us this morning for our webinar.
Everybody's busy turning up the heat.
Yeah, really, hey? It's changed. It changed quickly.
Our first cold day.
Flu shots and winter tires. Welcome to November.
Yep, I'm all done. Both done.
All right. Just waiting a few more minutes, Derek.
Sure. Always had a practice to make sure I start a meeting 15 minutes or I arrive 15 minutes ahead of the actual meeting time. Nice. And I noted with video conferencing over the last few months has kind of changed. I find people tend to show up at about 2 minutes before to 2 minutes after.
Right.
But they're extremely prompt.
Okay, we've got a couple. All right, just in essence and respect of time, we will get started, and likely people will hop on with us, Derek. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'm Irby Holland, sales consultant with the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and will be your host today. We're looking forward to hearing from Derrick Westhaver with 4Blade Consulting on how to create a blueprint for success to help your business move forward predictably and confidently. Two very strong words. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions for our presenter. And when we get to the Q&A, feel free to type any questions into the chat box, and Derrick would be more than happy and very interested to answer those for you during this presentation. So welcome, Derrick, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Barbie. Thank you, Kayla. Appreciate it. This is fantastic. And for everyone that's on the call and maybe listening in afterwards, thank you for being here. I'm going to go through a preso for about a half an hour and talk about the company that we've built, some of our background, some of the things that we do that can help companies predictably go forward in times of challenge like this. All right. So the agenda, we're going to go through the background, why us, what about our team, who are we, how do we get to this point, talk about the methodology, review our services, talk about funding options that people would be interested in, and then partnerships, things that we have built over the years and things that we have now that we could offer to potential clients. So takeaways from today, we've really focused and built the company around a proven framework to help you move forward with your business predictably and confidently. And that's really the biggest thing that we're struggling with today. In 2020, there's no mystery. It's been a very, very difficult year for people in business. It's been a very, very difficult year for people in general. So we can help in some of those ways. Second thing is increased clarity equals increased opportunity. And when I talk about that, the real premise of clarity is understanding where you're headed and making sure that when you move your company forward, you're actually doing it in a predictable and thoughtful way. And the last one is doing more of what doesn't work will not make it better. So it's kind of one of my taglines that I use very, very often. And really the idea there is to think about the things that you do now that you've tried. And I have one thought that comes to mind, which comes to how do you pay employees? So we've had that challenge from a client that they brought forward and said, we've been struggling to figure out a good compensation package that continues to incent the right behavior with the team that they have. So a quick thank you right up front. just so I don't forget, but thank you, Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce has been fantastic for Four Blade Consulting on a number of different fronts. One, getting our brand out there. A second one is providing an ecosystem of different types of people that we can meet, and also a platform for us to actually conduct commerce with people that are part of the Chamber and people that are not. So for the whole Chamber team, thank you very much. So we're in a pandemic, and what do you do now? So this has been the biggest challenge into 2020, the biggest unforeseen challenge in 2020 that a lot of people are dealing with. And there's a ton of different concerns that people have. You know, some people were able to stay open actually through the pandemic if you were deemed a necessary or critical business. There's lots of people, or many companies, that had to close or shrink down to emergency services operations, which affects your revenue, your profit, your sales, paying your bills, the health of your people, the safety of your people, and staffing and resourcing. So these are kind of some of the things that have been on everybody's mind that we've tried to kind of grapple with, if you will. And we don't do this in a silo. We'll reach out to some of our partners. We reach out to our clients. We reach out to people in different disciplines, whether it's in an HR vertical or whether it's in a finance vertical. It's like, what are you seeing? So someone's struggling to get their bills paid because they had to close for 2 months. You know, what can we do on the banking side to help? So we've really been kind of overly concerned, I guess, about a number of these things. And I'm assuming that those that are on this webinar today are thinking about this as well. The last one, I talk about reopening or staying open. I think right now, I could add one more. It's closing up again and then maybe reopening down the road. So as the pandemic tends to ebb and flow, will actually drive what we actually do. So a little background about us. So the whole mission of the company was to build a trusted framework to help companies create a predictable and a confident model that they use. And for us, we built this around 4 different tenets: the tenet of people, the tenet of strategy, execution, and cash. And they're all very different, but they actually all work in unison. So a little bit about my personal background. I was a water skier. I started water skiing when I was 11 years old. So I skied at a tournament level for many years, wakeboard, barefoot. And through those years, I had to have a ski boat. And that ski boat, when I first got it, had a 3-blade propeller on it, which worked just fine. And then I upgraded that to a 4-blade, and I couldn't believe the performance difference I received from doing that. So many years later, when I started to look at companies and the way that companies operate, and we started to look at the 4 different blades, if you will, of business, it made perfect sense that if there was a problem in one area, it didn't just live and breathe and exist in that one area. So for example, if there's a problem with your strategy, it doesn't just live in the strategic bucket. It affects your execution of the strategy, it affects the people, and absolutely affects the cash that comes into the company. So we started looking at this and diving in deeper and deeper when we started to build the company. And we found that regardless of where the issues reside, they will have some sort of impact on the other 3 categories. So building out all of these pieces individually is important, but having a unified framework that you can use for the entire company is super important as well. Now, from our team members, the folks that we've sat down and we've kind of dove in very deep to talk about what we needed to do and how we needed to deliver this. We all come from Fortune 500 backgrounds. So, and I'll talk a little bit more detail on that. And then for us, we want to offer a very predictable subscription-based service. So we call ourselves Four Blade Consulting, but we don't consult in the traditional manner, which is like an hourly basis or a project basis. So we offer services on a subscription style basis, so you know exactly what your fee base will be from month to month. And that's also a very core tenet when it comes to Four Blade, is that when we talk about predictability, we even do it as the way that we interact with our clients. So we're not on the clock, and we're not watching the clock, if you will, as we move throughout the month. All right. So YS, a little bit more on the background. I'll actually start with the bottom. We purpose built the company, so um, it wasn't the reaction to an event that kind of spawned the idea of building the company. We actually thought this through and said, you know what? We've dealt with so many different companies across North America. We've had some tremendous success. If you look at the highlights, you see some of the companies we represented. This goes across 25, 30 years of experience. When we brought that to the table, it's one thing to have great success in your job or your position or what you're doing, but the other part of it is how can you give back, and what methodologies can you apply to that success? And people would ask me from time to time, what's your secret? And I used to tell them, I just go see my clients. I know it sounds kind of simple, but I actually had a bit of a framework already in place before we actually kind of formed this out. So once we kind of got to this point, we started to dig around and we started to seek some of the thought leaders in these areas of business growth, and attended some seminars, in the US and across Canada, and started to study under a couple of different mentors to get to a point where we felt comfortable that we could take and offer a framework with our experience tied to it and offer benefit to the companies that are based here in Halifax and Atlantic Canada. All right, so real quick, we got a core team, myself, Donna, and Glenn. All of us, like I said, Fortune 500 backgrounds. Glenn's the only guy that had one job. So I kind of joke with him all the time. He was with Bell Alliant here up until, a year and a half, 2 years ago. But he had spent 30 years with the company versus Donna, who was with GE and Canon and Compaq and Dell, and myself as well. So rich background, lots of different trainings that we've received around sales and how to build out companies. All right, so one of the questions I always ask is, if we could show you how to increase your cash flow and increase your profit while working the same number of hours in your company, would you continue the conversation? So the premise behind the actual framework is that we want to dive in and improve the efficiencies of those different components of your company, but not at the detriment of the number of hours that you spend in your company right now. Everybody's probably done this or does do it or has done it or still does it. Is, Sunday afternoon, that's when I get in QuickBooks and go through my numbers for the week and make sure everything's up to date and the expenses and invoicing and all that kind of stuff. So, what we want to try and do is not put any more pressure on you as a business owner or a business leader or even your team members. We want to make sure that we expose the areas where we can improve and do that with the same number of hours and not actually create a negative impact on the sustainability of your team. So I always talk about leadership in crisis. And I look back on my history. I started in this business 1985. I started in the IT business and eventually got me to today. But I pointed at a couple of different things that happened in my lifetime that I saw. I was only in business 2 years and, working as an employee, and Black Monday occurs, which, I thought the whole world was going to end, almost a financial meltdown of the NASDAQ in the United States, which of course comes to, their favorite cousin, us Canadians. So if I look back on that and say, what did I do back then? What are some of the things that I actually did? So I did lose my job at the time. I did have to go find a job. And I remember towards the end of my job seek, which was about a 12-month period, I remember applying for a position, and part of the differentiator I put on my application for the position was I offered to go in and work for the company that was doing the hire for a month for free. So I kind of wrote it up and said, look, I know there's lots of people out there that have a similar background to mine, but in order for you to really see how I differentiate myself and how I can add better and more benefit to you, I'll give you a trial period so you don't have to spend a dime to take that chance. So I did end up getting the job. They waived the 1 month. So it was kind of a positive outcome for all of us at the time. But I was thinking back to what are some of the things that people have to face and challenges in times like COVID. So if you look through this list here, SARS happened, Y2K, the dot bomb, September 11th, the '08 financial crash, went through a lot of those things. And, I actually did very well in those times of challenge. This is a little representation of what it looked like. So, if you look at that blue line that goes straight up and down, at the very bottom, 1985 is when I started my career. And you see down there, October 19th, 1987, the Dow falls 22%. Yay, team. Not the greatest times. But really, the point behind this slide is to look at how we fought our way back. And that's the message I want to leave you with from this image. If you look from 85 to today, industry and individuals always find a way to fight back. And that's the core that I believe in. And that's why we actually offer, Four-Blade talks about offering, the strategic side, the execution, the people, and the cash side. So if you look at what's happened for the last, 30, 40 years, we always find a way to grow. All right, so fundamentally, what do we want to do? We want to, we help you work on your business while you're working in your business. And that's a critical differentiator. And, the real core is we want to free you from some of those things that you have to worry about all day long. So you can really focus on being the absolute best that you are and create a differentiator so that when you compete for business against your competitors, it's easy to see the value that you bring to the table above another competitor. And that's a real key that we want to offer. So here's some things to think about. And these are questions that I always ask when I meet somebody that's a business owner that's new and is curious about what we do. The first thing I ask them is, do you have a 36-month rolling forecast or a 12-quarter rolling forecast? And that's a big indicator for me as to kind of the future. This kind of talks to strategy. So are you thinking about what's happening this year? Are you thinking about what's happening this month, this quarter, this week? Or do you actually have a view of the future that's at least 36 months long? I used to build 5-year plans. I did it for years and years. And eventually I got into probably around 2004, 2005, and I stopped. I switched it to a 3-month plan because I could actually see the 3-month plan, 3-year plan. I could see that 3-year plan much better and more tangibly than I could see the 5-year plan. I never ever remember getting to the 5-year plan. So I remember getting to maybe the 4-year and then adjusting. So that was one of the drivers. Do you have an annual budget? It sounds like a small thing, but it's super critical to understand what you're going to spend to actually have the company in operation. Does everyone in your company know your number one priority for the quarter? And does everyone have a goal that drives that priority? That's a real key as well. And that's when we start to talk about, how we execute the overall strategy of a company, right? If the people that are actually out on the front lines, whether it's sales or operations or delivery, if they're not quite sure what from a CEO view or business owner is, then there's a whole gap that they have to try to figure out on their own. So the next one, number 4, plays into that thinking, which is around the communications rhythm. So you want to make sure that you communicate well and clearly to your entire team, from business owner all the way down, and then the people that are on your team that have team members with them, that they clearly understand where you're headed as well. And does everyone in the company have accountability for their work? Ron Lovett, local guy, super successful. He has a phrase, he says, well, we want to give people back their brains. And he talks about a story where he actually had a situation where he needed to add an asset to the company. And he basically told the guy that was in the field, here are the parameters to work within. You go figure it out. And the guy did super successfully. We could talk more about that in another time, but it's a great story. So do you have a way to celebrate and reward your team members for outstanding performance? That's also key. We get paid to do our jobs, but then there's also the whole piece of, how do I really know that I am a great contributor, right? And I think at the time that we're facing now with COVID and people's limited opportunity to socialize, and raise a glass on Friday afternoon, we had a great week, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is a time where we really need to focus in on understanding who the star players are, the A players in your team, and actually letting them know and having a process to do it. And I love doing that. There's nothing more fun than celebrating the success of a milestone that's hit or a goal that's been delivered. So a couple of one-liners that I use all the time. What cannot be measured cannot be grown. So measurement is extremely important. Writing it down, putting dates beside it, measuring against the date, measuring against the activity. I know myself sometimes I go, I'm going to clean up the garage this month. And I said that in September. And I said it in October. And my garage is still kind of messy. So, we're all human. But when it comes to business, it's super important to actually attain those measurable goals and deliver them. Everyone's in sales. I know I say that goes without saying, but it's super important that regardless if you bump into someone in the grocery store or whether you're in a business transaction, every single resource, every single individual that represents your brand is in sales in one way or another. To be able to talk about the mission of the company, what the differentiators of the companies are, and how that company actually makes and delivers change in the world is super important. And problems do not get better with age. So one of the first things I do, if there's a challenge, we want to get that on the table right away and address it. So, all right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our services and then talk about how we actually do some of these things. So growth consulting, when I look at that, it's, the old Darwin phrase, it's been around forever. It's not the strongest, it's who's the most adaptable that actually do have the best chance at surviving. So I'll talk about BlackBerry and I'll talk about Apple. So in the tech sector, we had, BlackBerry who, I don't want to say they invented texting, but they definitely are going to get the recognition for how texting became commonly used by our society globally, right? And then you look at Apple on the other side. So where's BlackBerry today as a business and where's Apple today as a business? If we contrast the two of them and talk about them, the biggest challenge for BlackBerry is they didn't read this Darwin quote enough times. So they didn't really adapt quickly and they didn't change fast enough. They kind of almost looked like a bit of a one-trick pony, if you will, when you talk about the business aspect. And if you go over to Apple and take a look at Apple and the way that Apple behaves, Apple became an ecosystem all of in itself. They're not really a computer company so much as they are an ecosystem for change and for individuals. I'm an Apple user today. I was not for many years, but I see such tremendous benefit in their ecosystem. My music is there, my contacts are there, my email is there, my search engine is there, my banking is there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it goes on. I can flip my phone call to my computer and vice versa. There's many, many things that are benefits for me. So when I go to do a refresh, when I look at the other options that are available, that ecosystem has created a very, very sticky platform for me to leave. Now I start to add up all the work I have to do to leave the platform to go to Android, for example. And the minute someone says, okay, now you have to migrate all of your email over or all of your contacts over, first thing I'm like, no, I don't have that much time. I'm not going to do it. So we go back to think about where BlackBerry behaved as a business and where Apple's behaved as a business. Apple's created a very sticky ecosystem for people to use. And that's their adaptability, and that's what they continue to do. That's why they'll continue to be in the forefront of IT offerings and sustain their business long term. So from the consulting side, what do we do? So, one of the questions is, if we could double your cash flow and triple your profit, would you do it? I think everybody's going to say yes. So that's kind of, those are kind of the table stakes goals that we start to look at. How do we first look at your company and have a conversation about the ability to double the size that you have today? Where is it that you're heading? And from a profitability side of you, there's a great statement. It's, which I love, which is, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. And I'll tell people straight up, like, I really don't care about the revenue so much. I super care about the profit. If we can make the same revenue and actually increase your profit, that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're going to look at those things. So when we get started, the first thing we do is we build a one-page strategic plan. And we go through a number of different categories to understand what your company's all about. What are your core values? What are your core beliefs? What's the purpose? Why did you actually create this company? Lots of things that we look at here, we've actually gone through and have done this ourselves. I remember sitting on a beach and I can't remember where it was. And my wife looked at me at one point, she said, "Are you ready to do this yet?" So she's like, you keep talking about, the core that you have that you want to offer back. And how do we do this? So that's your real baseline. We go through the 1-year goals. We go through a three-year targets and build that out. We understand what actions have to be taken, what key thrusts are in place. Are you in a merger and acquisition mode? Are you just in a sustainability mode? Are you in a heavy competition mode? What are your differentiators? What is your core competency? Why are you different? Excuse me. There's a term there, BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. What is it you want to be in 20 years? What's your brand promise? And what are the critical numbers around that? So these are all key components that are important to identify how you take your company forward. And this is all around the strategy. Once that's done, we move over to the execution side. And from the foundation of the strategy, we put in quarterly execution targets, goals, activities, and scorecards. And this makes sure that once we have a target for the quarter, we can actually go and achieve it. We make sure that we have the right people in place. We have the right products and offerings in place. We have the right approach to the market. We know who our competitors are, right? And when I said earlier, if you can't measure it, you can't change it. We will measure this. We will put those hard targets down and we will learn. You don't always hit the targets, but you learn from those targets and how you got there. And that what you learn from that is how we expand upon that and grow. Critical numbers, absolutely my most favorite thing. Everybody has a critical number. And this comes from the personal side. It comes from your business side. You may not even know it. But you start off with a critical number. It's your age. Someone's always going to ask you, well, how old are you? That critical number actually means something. So we do that for the healthier company as well. So, people say, well, I'm 25 years old. So you assume right there with that number, it means something. It represents you probably went through school, you might have went through post-secondary, et cetera, et cetera. When your company, we want those numbers for you. So at the end of the week, when you say, this is the end of the week, it's Friday afternoon, our critical number I was heading for was 100, we're at 105. You rocked it. You don't have to care about how much revenue, how much profit, what the expense line was, what were your COGS, what was the cost of goods sold. You don't have to worry about any of those things. We build this out so it's very, very easy to look at. However, you look at it all the time. You look at it every day and every week and every month and every quarter. And that's how you actually hit your numbers and grow your company. And from that, we can actually find the soft spots that need to be either developed or enhanced, right? And it's a really cool process. So some of the third parties that we use are Rain Group. This one I really, really like. Rain Group is something I've used for almost 20 years, based out of the US. They've got a ton of sales resources. And I'll get different white papers and documentation that I'll share with the team that I'm working with. And RAIN stands for rapport, aspiration, and afflictions, impact, and then new reality. And the reason I put this out here is because the last one has probably never been more important, is our new reality and how we work and how we operate. I started off with I was saying earlier on before we started this meeting, I had my first home office when I was about 21 years old. So when the pandemic forced us all to work from our home office, it really wasn't a big change operationally for me. The big change for me was socially, how do I interact? And today, doing a remote webinar like this is probably one of the most difficult and challenging things to do for me. I'm used to being in front of people. And I said earlier on, I'd rather be in front of 1,000 people because I can really feel what's important. So please send your questions in. let's make sure we have a good dialogue after I'm finished the preso. So from the Rain Group, they've got things, they've got a document I read recently around virtual selling. And selling's changed forever, right? Selling has really changed to have been from a feature function benefit to now value-based. People really aren't as interested in the price. They are, so a preface, they are interested in the price, but they're not as hung up on the price as they used to be. They need to understand the value proposition for them. So let's go back to my comments about BlackBerry and Apple. Apple provides me tremendous value, like unparalleled value for Derrick's day-to-day working operation. I get unparalleled value from what Apple has provided in a platform for me. So for you as a company, you have to look at all of these aspects and say, where do we play in our sales approach, and what do we need to help deliver this? So here you have things like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, websites, ClickFunnels, Instagram. I just kind of put the bunch off the top of my head that you can use. I want to point out a couple key things here. So LinkedIn, for example, you can create a LinkedIn profile, costs you nothing. You can create a Facebook company page, costs you nothing. A Twitter account costs you nothing. YouTube, depending on how you use it, there may be some fees there. Websites, they will cost you a fee to launch and build it, but to operate it, super, super low cost. ClickFunnels are fee-based. Instagram, you can create an account and use it. If you look at the digital footprint there, and you look at Hootsuite or Zoho or Sprout, they are a fee-based subscription service that helps you manage all of those other things. But I want you to think about how you are represented on the web today in your digital footprint, and what you can do going forward that costs you really only a little bit of time to create your image and your brand that people can go look at. So this is a very, very, very important piece of your strategy right now, is how you actually offer your services to kind of the faceless crowd, if you will, people that you've never seen yet. How do you get them to go and look at your products and services? We walk through a core customer review. Many people will ask, who can buy your product? And oftentimes people say, anyone can buy my product. And that's true. But who really wants to buy your product? Where's the differentiator? Where's the need? What problem are you solving? Where are you adding benefit to your clients? I'll show you how that's important. So, and what's the purpose? Well, we want to make sales easy. That's the big deal. The better we are at understanding who buys, the easier it is to sell, which can create that volume. We also do a deep dive on your X factor. What is that differentiator that you have? What is it that people look at your company and they can actually very easily look at it and say, okay, so are you a Me Too product, or is there something different about you? And if you're in this space, is it a busy space? Is it not so busy? What is it about you? The next piece we go through after we've identified kind of that needs-based selling, now we flip it around and start talking about selling added value. What is it that you can offer to your client that's different from anyone else, that adds value and creates that sticky type of relationship that you want to have? Because you really don't want to have to fight for every single deal that you get. You want to be able to create a relationship with that buyer so that over the long term, they have a relationship with you. And when they need to buy more or they need to consume more, they just go back to you as a de facto standard. The last part is there opportunity for innovation and collaboration? This is super key. If you can figure this out, then this is where you're going to win the most. And this is where your X factor fits, is right in that cross section between that added value you're going to offer and then innovation and collaboration. When you get to this point, you can pretty much choose your price and ask for it and get it. Again, I'll go back to Apple. Is Apple the cheapest IT provider on the planet? Oh, no, they're not. They charge as much as they can get. I say that tongue in cheek, but they charge, I could buy, technology for less. But Apple is able, they've got this figured out, and they built, part of their X factor is that ecosystem. So they can almost dictate what price they choose, and they don't discount. So let's say you're a wellness clinic, for example. You've got a bunch of different attributes about your company. We walk through this process. We try and get this figured out. And maybe what we find, your X factor is, your location could be the same, your experience could be the same, sustainability could be the same, but it may be that a couple of different aspects of your company are actually that X factor and differentiator. And customers will actually drive to your location, even if it's further away, if you're open 7 days a week, for example. So this process is super important to get nailed down as well. We go through the business flow map. We understand how the money comes into the company, how the money comes out of the company. We'll do a deep dive in your financials and make sure that we understand exactly the expense against the sales. And then we categorize it and we prioritize it. So we look at this and say, okay, and this is quite different than what your accountant's going to give you. We walk through this and say, okay, when you're spending money to market your company and your brand, how is that money coming back in, right? This really helps you understand what's happening within the company and where to actually do that spend. So here, if I looked on the left-hand side, I'd say if only 2% of the sales come in on the conference side, I'm probably not going to do conferences any longer. But then if I look on the right-hand side and say most of my expenses are attributed to my staff, I need to make sure that the staff members are actually driving my brand recognition and sales on that end. We walk through a functional accountability chart. This is really important to understand who owns what part of the company. And every single time I go through this, people are surprised. They'll say, hey, I thought Susie did that. And I thought Jimmy did this. Jimmy does both those things. So it's really a bit of an eye opener, and it doesn't matter the size of your company. You could be 2 people, you could be 10 people. You're always going to learn something about the behavior of what people do when you don't see them and the work that they're actually doing and what category that is. We go through Rockefeller Habits, one of my favorites. Rockefeller, if you didn't know, it's the first billionaire in North America, an oil tycoon in the 20s. So he's got 10 super important habits that we follow. First one, making sure the executive team is healthy and aligned. That's super important. Making sure you have good communication rhythms. We start off with daily huddles, then we do weekly reviews, we do the monthly reviews, etc. So this is really good to create alignment with your teams. And then what do we do with all this information? So we have 2 different software platforms that we use. We don't sell them. If you're a subscription user with us, then you get one or the other depending on what the best choice is. And then all this information that we gather resides in those online tools. So your strategic one-page plan, you'll be able to see it here. Your team members can see it. And back to if you can't measure, you can't change it. Everything gets entered into the online platform. So it could be a metronome in one case. We use a line for different teams. It depends on the type of team that you have, and it'll be determined very quickly which one is better. They both offer the same functional platform. And this is, it makes adopting new habits much, much easier for your teams. It's not a project management tool. It's not Monday.com. It's not your CRM. It's not some of those other tools that it's not Slack and things like that. This is looking at your company as a whole. And when we talk about the strategy, execution, people, cash, it all fits into that realm. So that's where we capture this information and monitor it to make sure that we're affecting change. There's some real key things that we have in there: daily huddles, our one-page plan, your critical numbers, all your priorities, things that are stuck. Right behind critical numbers, what's stuck is really a huge importance to me to make sure that we get things unstuck. People that actually use the platforms usually deliver way more output than they had before. So earlier on, I mentioned that, when we look at changing some of the things that you do in your company, we want to do it with the same number of hours that you have today. So this helps your leaders in your group, not only just the owners of a company or the CEO kind of down. This is really your entire team. And, everybody gets engaged and actually starts to work with more of a collaborative approach than maybe a unique individual approach. So our offerings, we've got a couple different things we're doing. We've got business growth consulting, we've got webinar training, and then executive coaching that we do. And then we break that down into the amount of effort that we have to have. So whether it's workshops or weekly calls or monthly reviews, quarterly reviews, etc. part and parcel of all of this is we also have built our own ecosystem where we have people we can refer that are accountants, people we refer that are venture capitalists, salespeople, marketing and strategy people, financial people. So if you're looking to grow your company, and let's say you're going to buy another company, we have a few people that we can talk to and say, help us understand what we need to do to actually raise the capital to actually make that acquisition, for example. And then for webinar training, as we go into 2021, we're actually building out a new platform that will be released probably in the January, February timeframe. So for now, if you're looking for information about that, you can hit us at info@forbladeconsulting.com, and we'll email you back all the dates and get you on that page. Executive coaching, this is the one-on-one practice. So depending on, and this is really built more in an ad hoc way, depending on what's required by each individual. Some of the funding options, we work with NSBI and some of the other government agencies to understand exactly what's available. And we have been successful at getting grant money to cover some of the services that we offer. Some of our partnerships and resources, from Vern Harnish Scaling Up, Bradley Smart with Top Grading, the Align Software, and so forth. We use a lot of different resources to deliver the content, and we're part of annual events that we attend. This one we didn't due to COVID, but we usually attend a 1 to 2 week seminar series throughout North America to continue to actually grow our knowledge base that we offer. And then back to takeaways again. So this is a framework, and it's all around predictability and confidence in your business. So increased clarity equals increased opportunity. We want to free you to think about what you can do next and where you want to go next without having all the other things to worry about. And then what doesn't work won't make it better if you're just doing the same thing over and over again. So that brings me up to the end of our formal kind of presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. There are some questions, I know. So Barbie, do you want to launch away with the questions?
Dive right in there. Yes. Well, that's all great information. I was listening intently. Of course, I'm in sales for the Halifax Chamber, and love that you said everyone is in sales, and we're always selling something all the time, whether it's for your business or for yourself or in your community or what that is. Some takeaways for me today: 4-blade, maximum thrust. That word, or those two words, in any business has some strength to it. The X factor is important. Know your number one priority and accountability for your staff for their work and rewards. That's always important. I think praise goes a long way, even if it's just verbal. It certainly does just make people feel good. So just remember that, those of you who are on the call, your mission statement. So yeah, let's dive into some questions. So how can I be confident in my blueprint in this time of uncertainty? We can't ignore that we're in a world global pandemic. And what does that mean to your blueprint at this time?
Yeah, so when we think about the blueprint for success, and we think about how COVID has impacted how we actually operate as a business, one of the core things that we always go back to is core customer. Who is your core customer? And how can you actually interact with that core customer? If you're interacting with a core customer that's a transactional base, then perhaps we can have a conversation around a long-term relationship where you're the standing vendor of record for a client. So I don't think there's really any way to predict the future. You have to have a very, very solid plan, and a plan that is easily executed by your team, well known and well communicated. But I think communicating with your team is probably the best thing that you can do, because we don't know what's around the next corner, and we don't know when surprises are going to happen. But if we have that cadence and open communication and dialogue with our team, that we have a very strong strategy and the capability that we require to execute, then that is the best way. So I guess the bottom line is preparation would be the key, right? Understanding what your blueprint is, but being the most prepared that you can be every single week, every single day that you compete for your business.
Mm.
And then
Yeah,
as things come, if you do that, you're better equipped to sustain in times of challenge.
great advice. Another question, which kind of rolls into that. Should my whole team contribute to the plan? Kind of
Yes.
answered that. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Everybody. And you know, I have all these different sticky notes that I use. So I've got different colors, and we go through an exercise, and we'll actually have, because most of the time the key is, yes, exactly. Yeah, I think we have the same colors. So most of the time your entire team have the answers. I mean, very rarely the answers come from outside of your team, right? You know your business best. You know why you built it. You know how you can compete. You know how you can win, right? So when we actually look for new ideas for the company, or what's going to be focused on in a particular quarter, having everybody participate is the best thing to have, right? And then you can prioritize those thoughts and those ideas to best benefit the company going forward.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Should I have, or a company have, multiple plans in place?
So I can be a little bit opinionated. I'll preface with that, but I really think that you have one plan, and the one plan can have many facets. So if I think about having a plan, the plan has got to be cognizant of the fact that you have human resources, you have technology resources, you have, you know, different competitive landscapes, different types of products, different go-to-markets, and those types of things. So one master plan with the understanding that you do have different disciplines that may require their own goals or action items and priorities. That's the way that we typically handle this. So everything always comes up to the top and then builds that very strong house of a company.
It all makes sense. Okay, so the majority of our members are small businesses, Derrick, 86% in fact, and we deem under 25 employees a small business.
Yeah.
Is this framework for a plan something that small business owners can implement when they're actively working on or in their business rather than on? So think small businesses.
Yeah, so that's actually my favorite question you asked, because when we first started to investigate building a framework and offering this, what we first heard was this is best in the $20 million range and up. So annual revenue of 20 million and up. And I started to think about Atlantic Canada and what you said about the number of employees per company and what the average is. So we actually built our framework. We've taken 3 or 4 pieces and customized it a little bit. And I don't care if you're a single owner of a business, you can benefit from this and you can apply it. So from the one person up, you'll actually get some benefit from this and be able to apply it to your business long term.
Yes, perfect. And again, I work for the chamber. It's not my company. I'm very passionate. I always treat the chamber as my company,
Yes.
and of course, our members are our clients. And I had some takeaways from today, so thank you for that. Another question: how often should I update my plan? I know you talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but is it? I mean, you obviously look at it and you keep an eye on it weekly, daily, monthly. But how often should I update the whole plan?
So our practice is every 6 months. So every 6 months, if 6 months is long enough of a year, if I can put it that way, if you're updating your plan in 12 months, then I think you're gonna miss opportunity. And so and everyone is different, but you know, we do review a bulk of it on a quarterly review. So doing a quarterly business review, we'll talk about it and make sure that it sounds the same as it did 3 months before. But when we get into the 6-month review, that's when we start to pick at it a little bit and pressure test it to make sure it is industrial strength and it is something you can stand behind and carry forward for another 6 months. So it is fluid. And if someone says, you know, after we have a 6-month quarterly or a semi-annual review, if a week or 2 later someone says, you know what, I get this great idea. Now that I think back, we should maybe be doing X.
Mm-hmm.
Then we bring it to the table during that weekly call and we talk about how that can impact the entire plan. And sometimes you have to make that kind of emergency move and say, we really have to rethink this. So let's spend some time to rethink it and then move it forward. So it needs to be very, very fluid, right? With structure, but fluid.
Great. Another question. You spoke earlier in your presentation about your mission. What is the most important aspect of the framework that people should focus on first, if there is a first, in relation to people, strategy, execution, and cash?
The very first thing is to actually do it. So is to consciously plan and put the effort into thinking about how you go to market with your company. And from that thinking, that will drive the very first thought that's next, because the very first thought that's next could be a myriad of different things. Is it people is my biggest challenge right now? Is it customers? Do I have too many customers or not enough customers? Is my strategy okay, right? When I sell, how quickly can I turn that sale into revenue? So it's a bit ambiguous of an answer, I understand, but really the first thing you need to do is structure your time and commit to focusing and thinking about it and not taking phone calls and emails and all that other stuff. You need to sit down in a quiet room with your team or with your peers that you have contributing and start to talk about that plan. You will uncover what's first, which blade you have to work on first.
Great. Okay, that's a few questions I had. Back to the participants. If anyone has any questions, you can throw them in the chat box, and we'd be happy to share them with Derrick or ask Derrick for his professional response on that. He has some great information, and again, his website, his email and phone number is on the screen in front of you. So if there's any other questions or any closing remarks, Derrick, you can sort of add a couple of more things before we wrap up. I'll give an opportunity maybe for a couple of questions to come in.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that's always on my mind is the health of our people. And one thing that I don't really cover too much here, but it's something I do talk about quite often, is the mental health of our team, the mental health of our friends, the mental health of our family is probably one of the biggest things that 10 or 15 years from now, when the books are written about what happened in 2020 on the planet, how does that really affect our psyche? And how does that affect the way that we actually work? I'm used to working in a home office and have been for pretty much my whole career. For people that it's been new for them. So I have a neighbor who is an engineer, and he needs to work with his team, right? And it goes on, the different stories that you'll hear. But I think the one thing that we need to keep our finger on the pulse is how people are actually feeling, whether they feel safe when they go to work. When they go to see a customer, do they feel safe? Are they as productive working from home? Are there things about working from home that they really don't, have an affinity towards? So I think the human factor, Barbie, is going to be the biggest thing that we think about ongoing. And for those business leaders and business owners, I do it myself. I'm always thinking, every time I take a call, every time I talk to someone, I'm assessing their mental health all the time. Say, do I think they're having a good time? Do I think they're not having a good time? Are they stressed all the time? And then we need to have that dialogue. We need to be open and authentic about it and say, everybody has, different ways of expressing themselves. I have a Harley Davidson. I'm very proud to ride, and I love doing it. And when I need to kind of hit that pressure relief valve on stress, I get I'm not doing it today because it's too cold, but I'll hit the road for an hour and I'll come back from that ride completely refreshed. I've thought through some things. My bike is an 03, so there's no tech on it. So there's no music, I'm just in my head. And I love that part because it's the piece that I need to figure things out. So the mental health of people, I think that's going to be the one thing that, that everyone should be cognizant of in order to get the highest performance from their team.
Yeah. Well, very, very well said. And I couldn't agree with you more. One of my personal favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
That is, couldn't said it better.
Yep. So with that, we are out of time, and if there's no
All
more
right.
questions, so thanks to everybody for joining us. Just hope that you were able to take away some key learnings in creating your own framework for growth for those attendees joining us today, which is really important in this pandemic. And we invite everyone to join us for a small business support series with the Department of Labor and Advanced Education and learn about hiring and training incentives to help grow your business, labor standards, and workplace hazards. So we have so much to offer. We do 2 webinars a week. It's just really important to, and thank you for the shout out earlier, to take advantage of your chamber. We work for our members to make sure they're engaged, informed, and connected. And during this time of the pandemic, we're doing it mostly by webinars. However, we do have some events lined up, so check our events calendar. Register early, because with COVID restrictions, we do have a limited capacity for registrations. So yeah, with that, thank you again, Derrick. The webinar was recorded and will be available to all attendees via our YouTube later this week. So with that, we'll close off and wish everybody a great and warm and safe day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barbie. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Chamber.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone. Have a
Bye,
great day.
Derrick. Peace out.